So time now to take a look at this morning's papers. With me this morning, the academic and author Joanna Williams and journalist and author Yasmin Alibhai-Brown. So welcome back to both of you. An awful lot in the papers about the leadership race to head up the Tory party, but also, of course, the country. So no wonder there is so much coverage. Joanna, you found an article in The Telegraph you wanted to talk about. And this is basically a call from Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, isn't it?
It is, and he's put out a warning that we've got to avoid spooking the markets. And really, this is a message that's aimed squarely at whoever becomes the next Prime Minister. Clearly, when the date of the next budget instalment was set for the 31st of October by Kwasi Kwarteng, he assumed he would still be in place, he would be the one delivering it, and he assumed Truss would be the Prime Minister. So now we've got all change, but Hunt's warning that this date and his budget must not change. And I think it's just worth pointing out how severely this ties the hands, if that holds true, how severely this ties the hands of whoever will become the next Prime Minister. We must bear in mind that nobody voted for Hunt, nobody voted for his budget. And I think this general message, this principle of we mustn't spook the markets, really, to me, spells the death knell of politics altogether, because it means that really, rather than putting forward big political ideas or taking risks to grow the economy, what we're being told is we must always consult the kind of anthropomorphized markets first and see how they feel about any political decision even a future radical left-wing Prime Minister might wish to take. And I do think we need to be very wary about going down this path.
Oh, it's certainly the temperature at the moment, isn't it? And yes, this statement coming just a couple of days after a new leader is confirmed. There's not much time for them to get their head around it and approve it, is there? It'll be interesting to see how that plays out and if they stick to Jeremy Hunt's plans. The front page of the FT is also on this subject, isn't it, Yasmin? Investors and MPs alarmed, they say, by the idea of Johnson's return to number 10.
Yes, and I do agree with Joanna that something about the markets determining so much is something very worrying. But the FT says, for example, economists such as Simon French and others warn that a Boris return would not be welcomed by the markets. And we've already mentioned William Hague, who talked about a death spiral and the worst decision, he says, that could be made in his 45 years in politics. And the FT is a very sober paper, and of course it's a business paper. But at the same time, there's the unspoken thing about what are we doing, playing around at this time. I find it astonishing that Boris Johnson thinks he can come back and others think he should. Pincher, Partygate, impropriety, Patterson, have we forgotten all this? Extraordinary. Anyway, FT is not very keen on this.
No, and interesting views across the papers, actually, which we will have to talk about another time. But let's turn to the Times, shall we, Joanna? Because this is all about how the housing market has been affected recently. What's the Times telling us?
So again, I guess it sticks on the issue of the economy, and this is as a result of interest rates having begun to rise and mortgage repayments becoming more expensive. House prices are selling now for less than the asking price. I think we need to sound a word of caution over this story, though. Apparently, the average selling price was 99.9% of the asking price, so we're not seeing substantial falls at this point in time. But I guess the point I really wanted to make here was that actually a fall in house prices would be welcomed by an awful lot of people in this country. There are a lot of young and indeed not so young people who are desperate to get onto the housing ladder, who really want to be able to buy a house and are prevented from doing that because house prices in this country are so ridiculously expensive and out of all proportion to people's earnings. So I know people who own a house, particularly people who have just bought a house, may be getting very anxious at this time, but I think longer term, a fall in house prices is not such a terrible thing.
Okay, and Yasmin, there's another article on the same page, actually, that you wanted to talk about, and this was about Rwanda deportation flights and the companies behind them and their involvement. Tell us about it.
This is such an important story, unfortunately, with all the political stuff going on. Priti Patel started this, in my view, horrendous policy that unwanted or undocumented people, migrants and asylum seekers would be packed off to Rwanda, a country which has a very questionable human rights record. Well, what turns out is that the airline, a Spanish airline, a charter airline, has pulled out of the deal. They were going to be flying these poor people out, and it's partly because of the decision by the European Court of Human Rights, case that was taken out by Freedom from Torture, and the airline won't be doing it anymore. I don't know of anybody, even on the right, amongst the people I know, who thought this was a good idea. So I do hope this policy's burnt and turned to ash.
Okay, we haven't got time, but I do want to show people pictures of the bison, the first wild bison born in the UK for thousands of years. It's in the Star not focusing on lettuces for a change, but bison. So we'll look at that. I haven't got time to talk about it, I'm afraid, but lovely to see you both this morning. Thanks so much for your company.